Yeah. Thank you. We canceled. Your brother wrinkled up. Guilty. Made him feel guilty.
Whoa. Same one. Yes. That'd be great.
Everything planned out and every single thing that we don't plan.
4.97 inches. So, straight east would be about. Dave Rush said 3.7 inches, if you add up all the roads that you use that were 8 or 9. 3.7.
Yeah, it's changing.
Say, Doug, if you'd like some plans, they're right up here. If you don't have a copy already.
Hi. Little bit wet out there. How are you doing now?
Better.
Yeah.
Although I didn't break it.
No, I didn't. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But it's getting old.
That is good.
Same things last time.
Just plan. Just plan. No. If you wanted to.
And we don't need the sidewalks. But we go. But our nephew did it.
Well, so.
Rain.
Yep.
Stockpiling for a while.
That's right.
Yeah.
Only reason why you got
Yes, I can't. Really? Yeah. Good to see you. I haven't seen you for a long time. We think it's summertime.
Melanie, if you don't have a copy of the plans, there's some right there in the corner. Very good.
Start throwing $6 million. Yes, I think the $6 million. You know, 'cause you gotta figure it, then you look to the inside. But like out here, how long will it take for the inside green to be so big that you gotta, get rid of that lamp sun and one coming in? You know, these trees get up all black some of that out. You're gonna several years down the road where that's gonna be an issue. But and even with these, because these are where the stained glass is big here. Maybe it won't be. That'll be flat. And there's
He wants.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, I didn't. Matter of fact, you know, but then they were all. My name. All right.
That's why he doesn't do good today.
Did you?
You want this first? Yep. Budgeting. I'll probably stand by for volume.
Yeah, well, our grandson is grown, so they are. And they're away now.
Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Hear my voice echoing. Oh, nice. Well, thanks for coming out on this evening where we get to relax from our nightly chores because the Lord is watering the lawn for us. So I was thinking in preparation for this meeting and going forward as well, and this verse came to mind. We actually had it in our opening devotion today as we're reading from the Book of Concord, the treatise on the power and primacy of the Pope, and this was the verse that was referenced. It's from Ephesians chapter 4, where St. Paul says this: "Our Lord gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ." I'm reading to you from the rite of ordination into the office of the Holy Ministry. And so if you ever have a chance to go to an ordination, just go. It's wonderful. It's neat. Yes, I'm saying it from a pastor perspective, but it's pretty awesome. And one of the other verses that is read is this from 1 Corinthians 4. St. Paul again says, "This is how one should regard us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found trustworthy." So the last meeting we had was a voters meeting, so just informational. We talked about ministry clarity, the capital campaign with LCEF, and the caution there was, I heard it, and so did Pastor Bauer, we heard it loud and clear. The work of us that you have called us, Pastor Bauer and I, to do is the work of being the steward of the mystery of God. So it's handling God's word appropriately, faithfully, preaching and teaching in accordance with it, and then administering the sacraments as well for the benefit of the forgiveness of sins. That's what we're all about. And life and salvation, the full assurance that when our eyelids close in death, our kids' eyelids close in death, our loved ones' eyelids close in death, we know that we're going to see them again. We're going to see them again in heaven. So that is the proper work of your pastors that you have called us to. Tonight we're talking about your work, which is really the work of the building up of the church. Now, is it 100% necessary that Pastor Bauer and I fulfill our calling to you guys through the plans that you're going to be discussing tonight? We would still be your called pastors if the tornado would rip through and demolish this building and sanctuary in one night. We don't need that. But for the purpose and work of the benefit for you guys and the whole of the body of the church, it's necessary. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the fellowship and for the work that the congregation does. So our work is to deliver to you faithfully, appropriately, in a timely manner, what God has delivered to us to deliver to you. That's the word in the sacraments. And so the opportunity and the discussion you guys have here tonight, we all do in our own respective way, is to think about how the work of the ministry that God has granted us to do here in this place would be benefited and would be accentuated by our plans. So just keep that in mind. It's good of us to have, I think, a clear line. So Pastor Bauer and I stay administering the word in the sacraments, and we let you guys, with your great abilities and great skills, of thought, of administration, of building, do that work that helps us do what you called us to do. That's building up the body of Christ. As we equip one another to speak that word, and the facility that facilitates the ministry is certainly a key aspect of it. So that was just my thought this morning in devotion, as we have been called by you guys to do, to remember you in prayer and to uphold all scripture in our Lutheran confession. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the rain that comes down from heaven, that nourishes the ground and causes the seed to grow, giving bread to the eater and seed to the sower. We know that just the same happens with the word that comes from your mouth. So continually shower down your word of grace, your word of truth upon us, that we might grow into the men and women of faith that you desire us to be, because you have called us to be your own in holy baptism. Bless us in our discussion and the presentation tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. You want me to do it again? Sure.
So thanks everyone for coming tonight. We do have some copies of the plans here, and those were the same ones that we passed out on the 9th when we had our special voters meeting. So probably won't go through a lot of the talk that we went through, you know, our background and all that. That's still available for you, but spend more time letting Tad from Vanman here provide us their master planning and the work they've done so far and the work that's to come. So with that, appreciate Tad making the trip from the cities over in this rainy day, and looking forward to hearing what he has to share with us.
Thank you. My name is Ted Swedin with Vanman Architects and Builders. Just give you a quick background of Vanman Architects and Builders. This is our 68th year of designing and building churches across the upper Midwest from our original founding in 1957. Dick Vanman designed and built a church for his brother-in-law as a pastor in Michigan. And we build and design about 30 to 40 churches every year across the upper Midwest. So it's what we do day in, day out. This is my calling. My mother was a youth pastor. My father was a heavy road civil engineer. I put the two together and I served the Lord in a much different way. So, want to also give you a quick update on where we are in the process. I do this day in, day out. So, but a lot of people, you know, this is once in a generational type activity to work on designing and building a new church. We always start the process in what we call master planning, which is where we're at right now. We're at the tail end of master planning. Master planning is envisioning. It's taking the wants and needs, forecasting what might be the future growth, and incorporating those in plans to create the spark, create that vision. You're going to meld that together with financing, as far as the capital campaign and so forth. We always, kind of jokingly say, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you hire an architect first to create the vision, or do you hire a capital campaigner first to find out how much you could raise to spend? The truth is the two have to come together. You're doing both simultaneously. So both creating the vision and working on the capital standpoint to bring those together to build by the physical structure. And I know the church is just a tool. The physical building is not the church. You're the church, the ministry of Christ. But the building's a tool to reach out to the community, and that's a part of what we do in master planning. We talk about how we greet people, what that entry fellowship space would be, how we break bread together, share a meal, worship itself, kids ministry, and so on and so forth. Taking all these fundamental blocks together to create. So just have a quick slide presentation to talk about the master plan that's been developed today. As I said, master planning. This is step one in the process, and we're kind of at the tail end of master planning. And next steps after this would be what we call schematic design, where we work on fleshing out additional details, talk more about cabinetry that might be built into classrooms for use of that space, what rooms might need a sink and some things of that nature. We get into more specifics. And after that, the next step is design development. In design development, we're integrating structural engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, design process, incorporating that. We're building the building skeleton itself. We do all of this before we do what is the next third step, which is the contract documents. Those are the physical blueprints that we use to build the project. So we fulfill mechanical, electrical, structural engineering along with the architectural. Civil engineering gets involved in that process to incorporate all of that before we move on to the bidding of the project and the construction administration, the ongoing construction and architectural administration of that. So I just want to lay out where we are in the process. We're at that first step of the 5-step process of master planning. Now, I'll just walk through what we've developed so far from a master planning standpoint. Gene had put together a great story of Mount Calvary Church, and I stole this picture from the story because I just loved it so much because it breaks every rule of OSHA standards. With the guy hanging from the rafters. So the first slide is our overall site, where we show as far as the existing building in this section, we turn on the plans too, and then new construction, new worship, fellowship, entry area, and along with the office area. Also on this site, you're not going to see, which is the existing parsonage, approximately in this area, and the other existing house. I call it the realtor's house. Sorry.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll call it the realtor's house, which would be great, which is the new parking. So we have a new access drive coming in here. It's getting a little washed out on the screen. New access drive coming in here, and coming around the parking and exiting back out this way. Continue to maintain the alley with the existing parking along the alley with a few added new stalls in this space. As a part of this plan, we were talking earlier right before the meeting, being good neighbors, being good stewards to the Lord with what we're doing here, but being good neighbors to those that are around us also. And I apologize, it's a little washed out on the screen here, but creating buffers, so berm, plantings, shrubs, trees to block ourselves from the parking to the neighbors and so forth. There's also buffer on the parking in this way going towards 6th Street as a part of that. So that's kind of a general site layout. And if you have any questions, please stop me at any time. Shout it on out, raise your hand, whatever you'd like to do. I'm happy to stop and cover questions as we go, or we could save them all for the end also. I also want to note on the site as far as what's being created. You have existing parking, and as I said, it's a little washed out on here, but you have existing parking, and we're incorporating obviously the new building over a large portion of that. But we have a net gain of parking stalls of 38 additional new parking spaces that are being created, even with the removal of some of the existing. So a net gain of 38 parking spaces. This is the main level as you walk in. So back to our entry, you come in, we have a drop-off canopy, so you can swing in with the drop-off canopy. We have a nice plaza out here. I have jokingly referred to this as barbecue area, potential to do some men's group, getting a big roaster out there and doing some barbecue. But as you walk into the building, we have the fellowship welcome area, the receptionist, and then we have our office room, conference room, and different offices, workroom, and along with sacristy to serve worship back at the altar. As we walk in, we have the large open fellowship area, and this is going to flow in then to your current worship, which we are designating as your new sit-down fellowship area. So in the center of this, in the heart of the church here, on the food portion, at least, we have the kitchen designated in this area with dish return that would serve directly into what would be the new fellowship area. New main bathroom groups, obviously center serve, so they're easily accessible and visible. And then as we come in, we have loading for worship happening, and of course the new worship facility itself. We're looking at retasking the existing office area space along with the back altar. These would all be new meeting room spaces, along with, and we'll skip to the next slide, which is the next level, along with the lower level. And I'm going to skip back and forth here real quick just to show you, because when you walked in the door at the main entry into the open fellowship area, this stair right here is the connection point to the lower level. And that brings you down right to the children's. So you came down out of the main lobby area down into the children's lobby, and then these red stars are designated secure access points. So we have 3 secured access points. So this entire children's ministry area is under, the administration of the children's ministry, not accessible to the rest of the congregation without coming to one of those secure access points. So we've remodeled the lower level. We've included new light wells along on the north side here to bring additional light into the space, creating the classroom space. The kitchen's obviously removed, which is now classroom space. The bathrooms have been removed and replaced with ADA compliant restrooms on the lower level. The secondary kitchen, I think we're calling that our arts and crafts area, along with the ed office downstairs as a part of that, and storage too. This is the upper level balcony. I'm gonna flip back to the main level. On the upper level balcony, you have the stairs that access the balcony right here off of worship. And there's also the elevator with access to the upper level. So the upper level balcony, you're entering on the stairs back here. We have areas for bells, for choir, for the piano, drums, band, orchestra pit, along with storage for those, and the elevator that obviously stops and accesses that entire space, and is all legal worship itself. Now we'll move on to the fun part, the actual visual on the exterior. The first picture, this is a ground level view, approximately by Knack Ave, and you're looking back at the new parking that's been developed in this area. This is that drop off where we came in underneath the canopy. So this would be the office, new office area behind that. Obviously, this is the worship. This is the altar, the worship body. What we see as the spire and the tower, that's actually the elevator shaft. It's both a utilitarian elevator shaft. It's also a great opportunity signature-wise for the church with the steeple. And then what we see behind that structure over here, this is the existing church body as it is right now. Here we're just a little more elevated up in the air so we get a better view of what's going on. This is from the back alley, so it would just be the northwest corner looking back. So this would be the existing church offices back at the altar here in the church itself. And then we're seeing cut through here. This would be the fellowship edition going through here with the back side of worship itself. And we're showing the natural light with the windows. You can't see it with this visual, but reuse of stained glass as a part of that. And then the last exterior is a raised elevation. This is on 6, looking straight through, looking at the worship itself along with the office, the drop off the existing church and the spire. And I was given a couple questions. If no one has questions, take any questions they want to answer. They want to go through.
Is there any parking along 6th Street? The property that we own?
6th Street up front.
Yeah.
The city's not allowing us to build parking directly to the street. So the parking stops back here. We have the buffer. That's a part of the historic district that you're in. So we're getting a net gain of 38 parking spaces, but not parking right to 6th Street.
What about snow load on the flat roads? What do they have planned for the snow to come off?
To come off
Or, well, either melt it so it runs off or.
Sure. A couple of different ways. We call minimal slope roofs. I understand flat roof because it looks flat. Code requires it has to drop 1/4 inch per foot, so we call it minimal slope roof. You can do EPDM. Yep. No, I just like the term too. The architects always drill it in that you have to call it minimal slope code issue. But a couple of different ways to tackle it. EPDM obviously has a black roof, a black membrane. Heats up and melts. The actual roof design itself, it's going to be designed to meet the snow load. And anywhere that we have anywhere we have a slope roof, obviously that comes down and hits a normal slope roof like that, you have what's called a drift load. And the drift load is 150% of whatever the snow load calculation is for that. So you account for an area where additional weight is going to be piled up essentially. HVAC wise, obviously we put nothing in this area. Those are key areas that cause an issue. Water infiltration, we'll avoid that. If the question is more directed to, do we want a minimal slope roof versus a slope roof? That's something we can definitely look at. This has different design aspects as far as emphasizing worship itself versus the office fellowship area in the front of it. We've done a lot of minimal slope roof design without issue. And if we look back in the 1970s, when EPDM, which is it's Firestone, Carlisle, this membrane. They had a shrinkage issue where the actual sun would melt the product and it would actually shrink up. That's long been resolved as a part of it. You know, used to be that they come in and put these magic roofs on top of 1860s historic buildings with parapets that only have what's called pumpkin block or clay block inside of it. Would pull the actual parapet in with that shrinkage. And that gives it a bad rap, but that's been resolved for almost 30 years. Well, we'll keep it in these apologies. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, that elevator shaft
Mhm.
on top, is that like a bell tower or what's that on top?
It sure could be a bell tower. It could be some louvered cupola also. Could be an electronic clapper versus an actual bell. Could be a number of things. Like I said, we're early in the process. We're just trying to create a vision here. Nothing is finalized and we are open to all sorts of comments and design input of what we want to do. But right now I would say that the elevator shaft, what becomes part of the steeple, those are probably a louvered grill with either a bell inside or an electronic clapper, which is essentially an electronic bell. Any other questions? One of the questions we received beforehand was what was the size of the new addition? The new building square footage is 10,100 square foot, and that's both the main level and the balcony level combined. And then the second part of that same question was what was the existing square footage that's going to be remodeled? Now, as I answer this, there's different variations of what's being remodeled. Some might be extremely light remodeled, like the existing worship that we're turning into fellowship space. It might be a case of we're only touching the carpeting and some lighting upgrade. Other spaces like that, the kitchen area, which is your current 1994 edition out here, where we're doing the kitchen area, that's a complete gut and redo of infrastructure. But there's 7,900 square feet on the lower level and about exactly 7,900 square feet on the upper. They're very close between those two levels. So, 7,900 square feet on the lower level that's being remodeled, which would be kids' classroom, children's area, and 7,900 square feet up here, which is a combination of fellowship space, meeting room space, bathrooms, kitchen, and additional open fellowship. I was taking up some dead space there, so there's some more questions when I finish it up. Yes.
Where the new addition goes on to the existing addition,
Mhm.
the roofs, is the plan to butt up the old with the new, or is
Sure.
it to build over the existing so that there's it's essentially two separate buildings, but the new roof goes over the old roof
Yeah.
instead of butting up to each other like this.
So there's a couple of different things happening. The existing worship right now is the slope roof that comes down to a minimal slope roof here over the space we're in right now. The new addition starts right here on this wall line. So essentially this would just be a parapet, and a parapet is nothing more than a wall that comes up through the roof that separates the two.
Got it.
It'd be two separate roofs, but of equal height. And that was a part of the reason of why this the minimal slope roof was matching as a part of this without spending money replacing the existing that's here already. But we're doing something with that, just from the stewardship standpoint. Did that answer the question?
I think you're just gonna butt up.
Oh, but yeah, that parapet, they're gonna butt them together, the parapet, you know, the parapet covering. And that wouldn't be noticeable. You wouldn't see that from the ground. That would just be on the roof itself.
I'm just thinking of the experience that I had for the buildings that I've been involved in is. I found that having a roof over this is the existing roof,
Mhm.
and you build the new roof over. So they're really, you don't try and keep the seam. When you butt them up like this, you have more chance, in my experience, to have leakage, because you don't get it sealed.
Yep.
And so when you build over the roof,
Anytime you go to a vertical surface, you run a risk of water infiltration,
Right.
which is why we do the parapet with the cap flash to limit exactly to your point. So the reason we essentially abut them together, we don't go to a vertical surface, is that's where water infiltration, 80% of all water infiltration happens at that vertical surface at that roof change. Yep, very astute. Yes.
How successful do you think we will be in tying together the exterior aesthetic with what we currently have?
Great question. This probably best dictates. So the materials that have been selected, this is preliminary, but as the consensus from the building committee, we talked about matching as close as possible. When I say matching as close as possible, when we talk about a brick that is what, 30 years old on the 94 edition versus a brick that's a lot older on the existing building. Brick is made of clay, and every time they dig clay, it changes in that pit. So every time they fire a run on it, you're getting a change in the brick itself. So the goal is to get as close as we possibly can. We're not going to replicate what's been done 30 years ago or 70 years ago. But to use existing, or to use stone, natural cut stone, what you see in the parapet caps of the existing building up front, and to replicate that and bring that into the existing building also. We've talked about using stucco or maybe a synthetic acrylic product. EFIS is a word for it, exterior insulation finish system. So we have areas on the higher gables. So this is the chancel platform underneath this area where we've got the roof over that. We have a transition before the worship seating itself. On these higher areas that we can use a material that structurally doesn't add an enormous load like brick or stone, because we have to then carry that structure down to the foundation. So we talked about using stucco or an acrylic system to mesh in with those. And it'd be of similar color to the brick to show, just to blend back into the ground. Roofing material we would match, obviously, the existing as close as possible, and reuse of existing stained glass over into worship it too. Just to try to bring a lot of those same attributes that you have in the current worship over into the new. And that was the overall goal. Yes.
Ted, you talked about the roof lines abutting each other, but actually the new roof line will be, I believe, 2 foot higher, because we're working to get this interior space higher as well.
Between the 2 fellowship spaces, you're saying?
Correct. The new addition, the flat roof on the new addition versus the flat roof on the old addition, or the old.
Yep, that's this wall right here.
Correct.
that we're talking about.
So when you walk in the front door of the new, instead of it being this high where that's the ceiling, it'll be, I think we were shooting for 11.5 or 12 foot. Ceiling height.
Yeah, and we don't have a great visual showing that. What you see is the canopy that's stepping up this section right here, but the physical roof structures themselves, because of the front wall essentially blocking that, you're going to see the same visual coming across there.
Right. Until it hits the old roof line. So go back to the previous height. I'm sorry, this is getting into the detail.
Oops.
Here we go.
Nope, next
Right
one.
there, if you follow the new roof line all the way across, and it's the old building. Right.
Yep.
You can see the step down right there. Where
Check. Yep. And that's just a visual effect to give that same facade across the whole front.
Yep.
So you don't see that zigzag happening.
I just wanted to emphasize interior space is going to be quite a bit higher than we're standing in right now.
Correct. And the goal is structural wise to use a parjoy system to give us as much height as possible in that space also. Yes. One of the great attributes when you walk into the front door and you're in that open fellowship space, we want a ceiling height that's high enough. So from visual sight line, because things look smaller with the lower the ceiling is, but also acoustically, the higher the ceiling is, the more bounce there is. When I talk, or when you talk, or when 100 people stand together and talk, you get all that reverb. And I know this as I've grown older, is reverb really hurts the conversation I'm trying to have with one person in front of me when I'm hearing the other 8 people around me. As you extend that height up, what it does is it pulls that sound away. So it has an acoustic dampening mechanism as a part of it, which is why we always want to bring that height up in fellowship as high as we can.
is the canopy, the drive-through, the drop-off, is that high enough to just accommodate cars, or does it accommodate like a bus, the community bus, the ambulance, a fire truck? How tall of a, how many feet is it gonna be up? So if we,
Yep. So this particular canopy. As you can see on this plan, there's your curb line coming in, so this canopy is actually extending partially into the drive path, so it's a great question as far as if a delivery truck comes. It's gonna accommodate a delivery trucker. The semi truck comes through, refrigerated unit, it's gonna run into your canopy. But that's a pretty darn tight corner. I'd be hard pressed to see a semi truck come into it. That should be his first indicator. And secondly, you should see there's this canopy there. There's gonna fit on it. But yeah, the goal was to keep the canopy more minimalized. We had additional conversations as part of the building committee. Is it a full drive under canopy? How big is the canopy? How small is the canopy? Do we have a canopy at all? What's the purpose of the canopy? Is it going to create a bottleneck because everyone's going to try to drop somebody off underneath the canopy? You know, these are all concerns when you talk about the front entry to incorporate as a part of it. So it was a compromise. It was a partial. Yes, Steve.
I know, at our other meetings we've had, talk about, because we don't see what the inside of the sanctuary is gonna look like. And, can you kind of share with us some thoughts, some options? The goal again was to make it look very similar to what we have and,
yeah, from a worship standpoint, obviously we're going from the back here. Fixed pews as we move forward, and you can see the front of the chancel here. We have the steps, we have the communion rail, communion rail up to the altar. Then we had, as I showed on the exterior, these were the arched windows that could potentially be stained glass. We're bringing in natural light over on the opposite side. Also, obviously, there's much difference between the windows to the west versus the east because of the height of the roof here. But what we've discussed for worship itself, physical structure, what we've discussed for physical structure for the worship is there's a couple different options we can approach it. We could do something as a steel structure, basically H-beams that are hidden inside of whatever pilaster construction we do to obscure those to make them a part of the physical structure. This is an economical way to build. And also we've talked about using glue lamp, either glue lamp arch or glue lamp beam type structure, very similar to your existing worship. Just to bring us, again, to take as many of the complementary items from the existing building and replicate those as a part of the new worship itself. So reusing glue lamp beams, glue lamp arches, reusing stained glass windows, potentially adding stained glass windows. The pews, a lot of the very similar features with natural light, bringing a lot of natural light into the space. So the worship itself is really being designed for the spoken word, versus, you see a lot of new churches being built and they're performance auditoriums, black boxes, some of them, different version of church for all sorts, I guess. This church is a lot of natural light, a lot of natural wood, stained glass, and specifically designed for the spoken word, meaning the physical structure, the way the nave style, long style amplifies Pastor Word's spoken word, and really is conducive to that style of worship. Up in the balcony, we have the orchestra pit, so place for the organ, a piano. We have area for the choir, right in between those two spaces, the pit, choir, and then area for the bells along with storage, the access points to the stair or the elevator. Physical materials that we would use inside worship still to be determined. Like I said, we're still in master planning, but I would assume they're going to be, depends on who you talk to. If you're talking to somebody in the choir, all hard surfaces, tile floor, everything hard to bounce. It has reflectivity acoustically. If you're talking to somebody that likes carpet, maybe there's a mesh between those two. Yes.
I can't see.
Go ahead.
On the main floor plan, is there a driveway nursery here? It's hard to read this fine print.
Yeah, and I apologize, my screen up here, everything gets washed, at least at my angle, maybe you have a bit of vision of it.
Is it?
It is,
It's-
it's right after the sanctuary
Yeah.
down to the. Right after the front, yeah, bottom center.
And this is not a PDF, so you don't see what I'm certain, sorry. Thank you for the description, bottom center.
Okay.
Yeah, we always,
Oh, I see, parent child, okay.
and the goal with the, the goal with the nursery is always to keep it accessible to worship itself, so a parent can come in and out, quick access to. And we've separated obviously from the children's ministry downstairs for that very specific reason. Yes,
I'm curious, why, I mean, I guess I'm so used to that alleyway being there, and that's what the front of the church faces, is the alleyway. That's kind of bizarre to me, and then the other alley in back, which you list as one way, it's like, well, it's not gonna be a one-way alley.
potentially, all the parking is directional. Yeah, I can see.
I understand that, but we've got a neighbor back here that her garage goes out that way, and geez, I don't think she's gonna be told which way to drive.
And I'm not telling her which way to go.
But no, I find it odd, but it faces the alley.
Faces, it's a sign.
It would face the street if it could all be parking out to Sixth Street, but it's not all parking out to Sixth Street.
well, this won't be an alley. This is just a part of your parking. This is what you're referencing.
Yeah, but basically, it's still gonna be an alley.
People will drive through it, absolutely. Yep. There would be a driveway and a parking lot as well.
As far as sightlines, though, there won't be any, you won't visually see anything, because all the windows are indirect light, so they're all on the sides. You wouldn't actually see cars driving by necessarily, if that's what you're worried about during the services.
It's kind of like, you wanna sink all this money into something and then it can't even be seen from Sixth Street. Then, and then an alleyway going through it, I don't know, I just find it odd.
So we're about 4 feet above the actual current alley, which is what we're showing here. The windows start about 4 feet above that point if we went down to the floor. So we're quite a bit above. Typically, we hold those windows up 2.5 feet. So you're full 6 foot person height. You're not going to see a car pass the alley. You're looking well at that point, depending on how tall we choose to put the windows. As far as visibility to Sixth Street. That's approximately the Sixth Street view. Now you have to remember there's a house.
Both houses will be in front of that.
Yep, you have to remember there's a house right here.
Oh, and then the two that are on six, yeah.
Yep. Well, the city's got quite a few comments in the historic district ran about those houses. I am not an expert to that. I don't know if Gene wants to speak to it, but let me just say the houses are staying.
All of them, even the one that we own?
Correct. In the historic district, and again, I don't want to try anyone's turf here, Gene, but in that historic district, you can't just remove a house. Apparently, it needs to be relocated somewhere else in the historic district. So I can't say if it's there forever, but until a spot opens up, it could be moved to. It's going to stay there.
So just so everyone's clear, the houses along Sixth Street are in the historic district, but they're also in the commercial development area. So that's why the city isn't allowing us to put parking lot right out to Sixth Street, and which we had discovered here a number of months ago. But the house that we are gonna have to move is McClemens' house, or the realtor's house here, because we need that for the parking. So that house will be moved, and we're working on that, but the ones right along Sixth Street, like now when I look out there, I can see some cars driving through. When I look that way, all you see is McClemont's house. So with that house being gone, you are gonna have some extra visibility from Sixth Street. It won't be blank because there will be houses along Sixth Street. Does that kind of help?
And I would ask the question too, might we be able to, since you own both the properties on Sixth Street, modify the trees and plant something smaller and more ornamental? That would increase visibility drastically, obviously.
So if those house were ever to move, can we say what goes in its place, like for commercial, the height of what they put in there? So it'll look like on the other side of my journey, you got these big apartments on top and you can't see anything behind.
Yeah, and that's gonna be way down the road.
Yeah, but well, I mean, we have to say so, but
I believe so. It was interesting, so the historic district had an open house a few weeks ago, and I went to it and visited with the folks. One of the board members there was talking about our expansion and so on. And I said, well, originally we wanted to put parking up to Sixth Street, but we can't because that's commercial district along that Sixth Street. She kind of looked at me like she hadn't heard of that before. So I don't know. It's different as you go that way because you're out of the historic district. As you get this way, how those two will mesh together, historic district, commercial district, that's, I don't know, Jesse, you have hear anything, but that's.
I don't think any of us in this room will be here when that happens, because it's so far down the road. And there's so much pushback from the historic district, where they don't want commercial buildings on this side of Sixth Street. And the historic district has a lot of leverage with the city. And we own those properties, right? So when it happens in 30 or 40 or 50 years, as long as we own the properties, we have more ability. Our kids and grandkids and great grandkids will make those decisions a long, long time from now. But I think it'll probably still be houses.
If the city does allow us to put parking up to Sixth Street, we already have a plan showing that. So that's the good news. And it offered a lot more parking outside, so it was a win-win. Any more great questions?
Do you want to touch a little bit on like the plan, like in the Northex, we have kind of like a seating for coffee areas or meeting spots and stuff. You know, that was like a highlight for some people that were wanting more small group gathering.
Yeah, so,
Nothing control.
well, as you come in the front door, we talked about welcome space, maybe a welcome desk, greeter, but and it's not showing up on the screen here, but you see it on your plan as far as the seating area. This might be soft side seating, maybe it's comfy chairs with a coffee table. It could be Bible study on a Tuesday night, or it could just be a space to gather and chat. All this is glass, so this has clear visibility coming out to the patio area where we talked about still pushing the barbecue idea, men's ministry barbecue. You know, and that has access coming back in directly to the kitchen across the hall here. But creating also some additional seating possibility for breakout areas, before we start talking about the fixed seating and fellowship, which could be rounds or rectangular tables, however we want to lay it out, as a part of that. But creating multiple spaces that could be different conversations point. You've got your stand-up conversation point, maybe it's just some high top cafe type tables as you walk in, standing type fellowship, soft side seating for a more integral conversation where you sit down and come through the space. Yeah.
How big is that space? I can't read the numbers on.
It's not labeled for the actual square footage of the fellowship space. Is that the question?
Well, I like, what's the width and length dimensions?
Yeah, it's about 32 feet east-west.
So pretty much just a little bit bigger than this space then, would that be about right? I think I measured it once, and this space, like from here to here, is like 30 feet.
Yeah, it's a little bit wider than this space, but it's quite a bit longer. than this space.
So I'm sorry, 30 what by 30?
It's about 32 wide at the worship the front door, and it's around 48 in length. That's just the large block area. That's essentially this space, not including what's flowing back through here. So you have everywhere in back of worship, plus the area between worship and well, your current worship, which will be fellowship too.
Where, have we thought about where adult Bible study is going to take place? Will that be in the fellowship hall or where's that gonna take place?
Well, it depends on the size. I mean, the fellowship hall is going to be a large event space. Depending on how you weigh it out, round tables, you know, you need 8 people per round versus a rectangular long. You know. So it's quite a bit of variance for that, but I had to look at the plan to see which one we ended up. This space we've talked about being segregated from fellowship itself to be a meeting room space. We've talked about potentially what is currently the chancel platform being space along with meeting room space. So there's a couple different subspaces depending on the size of the group. If it's going to be 30 plus people, you're probably in the fellowship, would be my assumption. That's going to give you the most space to spread out. But I'm hoping those groups are going to increase in size too. With the new facility. Yeah.
Is there any thought of how we will continue our worship while the construction's going on? Because a lot of that space is going to be flipped to new.
Yeah, great
where
question.
the kitchen is and all that.
Yep, it's a great question, and here's your existing building line on the south side. So you split phase the project. This would be my 2 cents. And there's probably 20 different ways we can do this, but we split phase the project. So we do all the footing foundation work for the new construction. Outside of that, we do the superstructure, bring that up, get it all enclosed, and we're getting into finishes standpoint as far as rough in for plumbing, mechanical, and so forth. In the new addition, you're going to start to decide how you're going to split phase the remodel. So that's one phase. Second phase is, do we tackle fellowship? The kitchen area bathroom group is going to be the most invasive without question. And that's the area where we have to figure out how do we provide restrooms while worship's going on here, because the kitchen took those out. So these are going to have to be remodeled outside the kitchen phase. So more than likely it's new construction, then bathrooms, then we come and do the kitchen, because then we have these bathrooms before we do the interior finishes of the existing building. But during that whole process, you're entering worship from the exterior. You're not walking through the new portion of the building. So the way it's segregated right now works really well construction wise. And of course, this all depends on how much of the project we built in phase 1. What is phase 1? That's still a question to be answered. And then we have the downstairs area, which could be its own phasing. Pretty much well self-contained for the kids ministry. And that could be with the upstairs existing, it could be with the new construction, it could be a 4th phase, it could fall anywhere inside of that. So we're able to segregate them enough, but the area that's going to be the trickiest is going to be the kitchen and bathroom group, without question, because they're right at the heart of everything in the existing building that we tasked. That space is being tasked. But I think there's a way to do it. There's going to be some temporary building barriers. There's going to be dust proofing as far as poly up and taped off and everything. And there's going to be construction going on while worship is in place. Not at the exact same time. You know, we always have a policy from a construction standpoint. You know, the construction week starts at Monday morning. It always finishes by noon on Friday. The rest of the Friday to clean up and make sure we're accessible and ready for worship as a part of that work week. Yes.
What is the, like, just out of curiosity, the exterior height goal or the exterior height of the sanctuary and the people? Spire.
So So the city has a rule on this of 36 feet, but the 36 foot is this is where the rule gets kind of funny. The 36 foot is the midline between these 2 points. So we're maximizing the height absolute possible to give you the best visibility, therefore the best presence to 6th Street and the community. The building is your signature board. And so we're building up to the maximum by the code. So I answer with 36 feet, but we're more than 36 because the code allows it because it's a slope growth. Yes, sir.
Did you discuss occupancy?
So everything is based, when we talk about occupancy with churches, you're what's called an A3. That's the government's way of saying church, you're an assembly of 3. Everything is based off of worship itself. There's not a secondary use, which means you're not filling the worship with 300 people and fellowship hall with 250 people and kids ministry with 100 people. Everything is based off the worship count, which is, the seating profile in worship. That's what the parking is based off of. That's what everything works off of. Does that answer your question? We want specifics to area because there's a whole programming thing as far as what the occupancy in every room is, and I can share that with you later. I don't have it with me. That's a rather detailed question, but we have the answer to it.
Is that what I just found out about?
Yep.
What do we have to be for it? 20, 2 seconds.
340. Worship is 340.
So that's packed seating. What's practical occupancy in the sanctuary?
80% of that.
So the 180 that you have on each side versus the 135. 135 is the number that we talked about. Where
Usable.
the usable like seating, like how many inches per person?
Typically, if it's pew, it's 21 inches per person. In reality, you're not going to sit within 21 inches of somebody tight to tight. So that's why we say the 80% rule. The 80% rule is if occupancy is 360, you'll feel full at 80% of that. Yeah, you can fit more people, but we're Midwesterners and we have our 36 sphere of influence. We really like to be so close to people. That's just a reality of seeing worship itself. It's not to say that at an Easter or a Christmas holiday service that you can get more people in there, but on average, 80% of the occupancy of that space, people are going to feel like it's full of that.
And just for reference, what is our current occupancy in our current sanctuaries?
Do we know? I don't have it on the sheet, Jackie.
Between 120 and 140, I think.
How many did we have at confirmation second service?
I think that was 194 or something, really packed in tight. 194. What was it? Someone wrote down, maybe I'm wrong.
Well, and some people were sitting out here and about.
Yeah.
There's about 10 people in the balcony. Main floor was packed.
Yeah.
And you were correct. That's the 135. That was an 80% occupancy on worship. That's what that number represents. Just a quick statement on worship. If somebody's wondering why worship was designed to the size it is. The goal for worship was for the congregation to worship as a whole. Versus if we talked about a smaller worship, what would be the point of doing 2 services? Would it save it? It would, well, it would. It would save us money from the standpoint of the physical structure, because it'd be a smaller square footage, but the congregation would then be split over multiple worships. So the design standard for the worship was to design a worship that the entire congregation can worship inside of and still have room for expansion as a part of that. They're getting better, keep going.
You show AV controls in the old building, you know, with the old sanctuary, but not with the new.
The AV was on the upper level of the balcony. When you say with the existing, you mean the fellowship hall or?
Well, you've got it in technically in what would still be the fellowship hall. And I'm wondering why there's nothing for the new sanctuary.
Well, in the new sanctuary, the AV control was in the balcony, is a part of that. No designated AV booth, and we could sure incorporate if that was the will, desire to go that way.
We would have the AV booth for the fellowship, or what would be the new fellowship for presentations and that type of stuff that would be happening in there.
Probably two AV, right?
Yeah, so we'll keep what's there. For when we have presentations, the events, that sort of thing. And then we'll have AV equipment in the balcony of the new sanctuary. It's not currently shown. You're right about that.
There was one question earlier in some of the discussions on coat racks and stuff in the main area.
Okay.
Or area.
Yes, we need code racks.
Or
Or someplace for people to hold their coat.
yeah, right.
Yeah. And I will just say back to, you're going to be saying, make this statement a few times. In master planning, we're pretty general, but we have had this conversation and we have all sorts of space that could potentially be, skip that last one, that's kitchen. Access, but we have all sorts of space in this existing area where we could put coat rooms. We try not to make specific coat rooms because they become bottlenecks. You can make it too large as a waste of space, stewardship wise, too small of a space, people come in, conversation starts, can't get in, can't get out, and all of a sudden it's not really a coat room, it's just another area of fellowship. So typically we like to do a racking system, put it in an area that's not visible. So it just be on a wall, but something that's accessible, but not completely visible, especially in the fellowship. We typically stick away from mobile racks. They're not very sturdy. You have to store them somewhere. But yes, we'll have to find a place for coats without question. Unless we just want to be like the Catholics and not turn the heat on. Everyone brings a coat and worship with them.
During our discussions, we always talked about wayfinding. You know, so when we have new visitors and so on, can they find, you know, where to go? And we talked quite a bit about that. You want to share some?
Absolutely, we're even on the right slide for it. So we always say we design churches for the unchurched, for the de-churched. Yes, you guys, it's designed for it, but you're gonna come no matter what. We could put the door on the backside, up a flight of stairs, through a fire escape, and you're still gonna walk in. But we want to design a church to make it as uninhibiting for the person first time to church or somebody that's gone away from church, comes back to the Lord. We want to make it visible. So we talked about a lot of glass, a lot of visibility, access wise. Take the mystery out of what's going on inside fellowship wise. Show what you're doing in the community. Be a beacon. It's dark here, you know, 5 months out of the year. So have a lot of exterior glass, show to the exterior what's going on. But as you come through the door, there are a few things that you want to see. 1, where's worship? 2, where's the coffee, which we have right in front here as our display. 3 is children's ministry. Those 3 things have to be easily decipherable, or we call it wayfinding, right as soon as you walk in the front door, to make it as unintimidating as possible to somebody as they come to church. Welcome ministry wise, we haven't shown anything here, but we've had a couple different conversations about how it would be handled. If you'd be a full-blown desk or it'd be a mobile structure, but have a place for, you know, when the new face walks in, that somebody can come meet and greet them without that person having to traverse across every aspect of the fellowship area, because that can be really intimidating to walk into a room of 100 people that you don't know. Versus come up to a, you know, friendly face, shake your hand and give you some information as far as what's to offer direction wise, where everything is located. And of course, as you walk downstairs, talked about children's ministry, there'd be signage, some sort of placard that, you know, to direct, but as you walk downstairs, there is an additional lobby downstairs. As you come in the door, you have like almost a family lobby, this open space here. Because what you'll see, back to fellowship here, what you'll see is we fellowship a lot of times, we all do this. So we try not to, but we do it anyways. We fellowship in our age groups. And a lot of young families will fellowship together. So creating a space for those young families to share their war stories, parenting stories, through what up and what's going on, to have a space for that's an important part. And that happens outside of, like I said, that red dots showing this secured area for kids ministry. The kids are inside that area, and you can't pass in without, well, permission with their own dedicated bathroom through. So fellowship space broken up through it. We're still taking more questions.
Well, I think the work of the committee and your organization has done a wonderful job of bringing in the new with the old and keeping our mission and our core values in focus.
Awesome. That's what we love to hear. We're here to serve the church. And I would just like to add, you're gonna have one of the best looking new fellowship spaces around anywhere. You didn't even have to do anything, just your existing worship space. And this space is gonna be absolutely gorgeous. It's gonna have so many, the question was about Bible study. What Bible study do you do? Well, hopefully it's gonna grow. It's outgrown. I've heard it's already outgrown this space. So, you know, you're automatically in this larger space, which would be my assumption. And that's just gonna be a phenomenal way to approach Bible study. With potential for breakout groups too. Like I said, we talked about this is meeting room space, other meeting room spaces, you know, walking out, additional meeting room space, or just out of the lobby itself. So a lot of different attributes that can come to the speaking of the existing worship, I feel it's important to talk on, to touch this point. And I know no one from the building committee brought this up, but a lot of conversation and a lot of thought was given to the existing space and renovating the existing worship, which we're now calling fellowship space. But how can we expand it? How do we plan for future growth? How do we make that work? And the issue we kept running up against is when we built this structure, we already had the setback line on the side. So our expandability to the north was limited to this very small space right here, which, if memory serves, I want to say it was like 25 or 30 seats, but it would be a space that acoustically, because you have the arch ceiling going this way, you're kind of in like a sub-annex space back down the hallway. So acoustically, you'd be disconnected from the worship itself and the symmetry of it. We looked at potential aspects of building out the other way, basically turning worship to a transactional. So you're at T like this, but then you're tearing down a lot of existing buildings. And we always say from a stewardship standpoint, retasking existing space is the best value you're going to get. So we talked about tearing down the space that we're in here to bring worship out to the south. That's not good stewardship dollars spent. We're tearing down space to create space. So, and that kind of led us to the point of a long design process. I'm not sure. We always say we keep designing until we find the final master plan. I'll have to look at the lettering. It wasn't A, B, C, D, E, F, or G. I mean, we were way down the alphabet before we got to the point of this type of design standard. So I just want to let you know that your building committee worked hard as far as what would be the best direction to go and best attributes to bring forward. Not to mention it's a real good billboard, the 6th Street main hub, so everybody sees that.
And what is I know there's a lot still to be done, but just cost wise, where are we kind of with that right now? As far as the building of this project?
Sure. So in master planning, we do something called project scope analysis. And what this isn't magic, but we have designed and built over 1,000 churches. So we've got a pretty great catalog of different church styles. And so what we do is take comparables to your style, readjust those from inflation that we've done, and then take a look at what that applies to from a square foot standpoint, what the new square footage for worship would be, what the remodel square footage on main level versus remodel on lower level, and so on and so forth. And we build analysis. And we did that in that analysis. So we've got the new addition, and so I would call this the full vote. It would be the new addition, the 10,100 square feet. The whole remodel of the lower level, 7,900 square feet. The whole remodel of the main level, 7,900 square feet. The elevator structure / cupola steeple, the glue lamp arches and the worship. And those are broken out because they're featured to the square foot analysis. So demolition work that we have to do in the interior. We have the canopy out front that we're adding, the house removal, both the parsonage and the realtor's house, and then the site development, which would be your entry drives, your parking spaces, landscaping, things of that nature. So that total package was $5,984,104. So it sounds impressive, like it's super accurate, but that's a square foot analysis based on historic church data that we have, which is pretty inclusive. Typically, our master plan analysis number is usually within around 5 to 8% of what the project scope will be. What I can't dictate is, we're standing here the 20th of June, 2024. When will you start? What's the inflation factor? I don't have that crystal ball. The last 3 years have been horrendous from an inflation standpoint. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. But 2022 was the highest inflationary rate in construction since they started tracking it in 1928. It was 16.4%, which is just horrendous. That has dropped. 2023 was down to 7.5 to 8%, and they're anticipating about 5% for this year. We're almost getting back down to that 3.5% kind of average inflationary rate for construction, both labor and commodities. So it's looking better. So it's easier to forecast. If you were a church 3 years ago, the story was a lot weaker to try to dictate what that price is going to be, because you're going to go through the capital campaign standpoint. They're going to do a strategic analysis, most likely, to give you an idea before they launch the campaign. And this is going to give us an indicator by the time the campaign comes back of what is the scope, what is phase one. Is phase one the entire thing that we've talked about? Is phase one a portion of it? If so, how much? Which portion? And we've shared some information with the committee. There's been some questions asked, so I know they're looking into this as far as how we could subdivide the project. And like any project, we can divide it 20 different ways. What is the best way forward for the congregation is the question. And then when the project starts, will help us dictate what that cost will be.
And then to add things like furnishing, like you said, like the furnishings and FFE, is that what you?
Yes, fixtures, furniture, and equipment, FF&E. So in a church, FF&E equates to the audio video system for worship, audio video system for the fellowship area. That would be, it would be office furniture, desks, computers, telephone systems. It would be chairs in the fellowship, anything. It was explained to me this once. What I was explaining this to a pastor, and he looked at me and goes, "So if I picked the building up and turned it 30 degrees and shook it, if it fell out, that's me. If it didn't, that's you." I said, "Yeah, okay." So, but pews are fixed. Pews would be a part of the project. We need those for occupancy. If you're doing fixed seating, we have to have those installed for occupancy. So if it has to be there for occupancy, it's a part of the package. Occupancy is a government way of saying you can use your facility that you designed, built, paid for.
So how much does that add to the cost then approximately? I mean, your usual estimate of a project like this would add how much in FFP costs?
Yeah, under all, if it was all new construction, the rule of thumb is 10% is your FF&E cost. Since you are a remodel, you're kind of a hybrid of that. Yeah, you're putting new pews in. Yeah, you're doing the new office area. you're probably gonna be somewhere in that 5 to 7% range would be my assumption based on past projects and what churches have spent. You can buy all the great theatrical lights at $5,000 a light, and you can, spend $500,000 in AV if you want to go way past that budget. But on average, you're probably gonna spend 5 to 7% on the existing facility that's added. That is the norm. I don't want to force questions, so I'm all covered.
The intention is that everything then will be on the same level, like what we're looking at here?
I always answer that question with, if land usage isn't an issue, you have all the land that you need, the best way to build a church is all on one level. So when you walk in the front door, this is ADA accessibility, this is sight line, this is just travel. Stairs become obstacles, elevators become congestion points. I'd love to say, yes, we're gonna do everything all at one level, but as you might have noticed, you're on a restrictive site here, you're buying homes to tear down in order to expand and create the parking that you need. So what is on the main level is your entry, your fellowship, your worship, your seating fellowship, that this versus stand-up fellowship, your kitchen. The only thing that wouldn't be on that level for an attendee would be your children's ministry is downstairs. We're reusing that existing space. Obviously, on the upper level, we have the balcony, hard to do a balcony on the main level. So we have the balcony for the choir, for the piano, for the organ, all those sort of things, bells and so forth. But as a whole, the heart of your ministry is all on one level without making people traverse up and down, except young families are going to have to go downstairs because replicating another 7,900 square feet for children's ministry would be pretty costly. Or building new 7,900 square feet.
I'm just saying that, if we think about where we are here, and we step out that way, that's kind of a drop, so it's gonna be, there's not gonna be a ramp or anything, or.
Yep, absolutely. Nope, it's all gonna be one level going across. That's what I was saying when you brought up the question about the alley. Well, this being 4 feet below the floor elevation of worship or this whole main level. That's why you're not gonna see anyone driving through that alley, is because there's gonna be a grade differential between the alley and our main level, which we're standing on right now. We will continue this going forward, which is going to be, as you drive off on your entry drive here, come in off your entry drive, canopy drop off, we'll be bringing that grade up to meet floor elevation and everything work as part of that. Yep. So then as you go south, we drop off the grade to meet back to the existing houses, because what we can't do, and we're preliminary here, so we haven't engaged a civil engineer, but we will have to, before we go to the city for the CUP, our conditional use permit, which is required for a UP occupancy. We have to hire a civil engineer because we have to be concerned about stormwater management, how we're going to treat for all the impervious that we have. So the building's impervious, the parking's impervious, a pond itself with water is impervious. That is the rules read. So we need to manage that stormwater runoff because 200-year, 500-year rain events seem to happen every 5 years now. But we want to be good neighbors. We don't want to create a structure that's going to flood out a neighboring parcel. We need to manage our water right here on site.
So the sanctuary is going to be level, not slope.
Currently it is. It could be because there is no structure below the new worship. This is all new. If you wanted to slope it, it could be sloped. I would tell you the rule of thumb on worship is 50 feet. From the front of the chancel platform to the back of the pew should be no greater than 50 feet, which this is not. And so this is how that rule plays out. Sightline wise, when you get over 50 feet, you have that diminishing return where you start adding more pews, and because of our focal point, the way things get smaller, it starts to block or impede our visual. So you'd have to slope the floor to achieve that. You could slope the floor here if you wished. It's not required from a visual standpoint, but since you have fixed pews versus flexible seating, you sure could slope the floor, a minimal slope. Yes.
When will we see designs for the sanctuary, the worship?
So typical designs on the interior, we work in what's called Revit. It's a software program where everything is three-dimensional. So when they create this imaging, this actually happened when this was done. All it had to be done was assign whatever the building exterior material is and kind of polish it a little. So the interior is similar to that. So when we get into schematic design, we start laying the interior walls out and everything. We can move the camera around and do imaging on the interior of the space also as a part of that. We can create it now. It's just more work. It's not a part of the current contract, part of the current process. If we wanted to see the worship, we would have to model it essentially and dictate the time to create that. And it just hasn't been done quite yet. But it's a part of the schematic design portion, which is the next step after master plan.
But is that gonna be much like this sanctuary? The interior?
Good question.
Yeah.
To be answered, to be determined.
Okay.
The goal of the committee, not to speak for them, but was to replicate as much of the existing worship as we could. And that's why I was talking about ULM beams, natural light. Not a lot of natural light in the current worship. We were looking to actually amplify the amount of natural light into the new worship, both on the east and west side of the building.
Is the intention to move the current organ?
Yes.
And is that cost figured into the cost that you presented so far?
That would be part of the FF.
I think that's factored into the organ remodel, because you'd have to disassemble it to do the project. So.
And we've had several conversations with the organ disassembler, refurbisher, as far as giving dimension and sizing for both the balcony and the space for the bells. That's actually what this large space is.
In the pipes. Yeah, there's a organ chamber for all of them.
Yeah, the pipes are right mounted on the wall.
They'll be elevated off the back of the balcony so that we'll have floor space. Okay.
And there was a visual study that Steve Krause did of that showing what you would see from chancel platform looking back. And that's why we the actual visual.
Tad, can you spell the name of the roofing materials you've been talking about? What is it? What did you even say? In the sanctuary?
A glue lamp. Glue laminated lumber.
Got it.
Glue lamp, sorry.
Glue lamp. I'm like, what is that? Okay.
That's a new space age product. No, it's wood.
Like, oh, but I just couldn't understand what you were saying.
Yeah, so what glue lamp is, sorry, I use a lot of acronyms and jargon. But what it is, it's wood. There's a set amount of companies that make glue laminated lumber is what their actual term is. And it's wood, they put it down, they put a layer of resin on it, and the fiber product, they put another layer of lumber on that, they repeat this, and they press the whole thing together under heat, and they wrap it all together and they let it sit. And what they're creating is a single structural member that's much larger than a dimensional, like a 2x. They might create a 14 by 22 inch beam. And what this is, similar to your worship, that's glue lamp, what's in the worship. It's not one piece of wood, it's multiple pieces of wood that is laminated together. A veneering system. And the reason we love to work with glue lamp, same with natural stone, you know, these are God's materials. You know, you talk about the natural structure of wood, natural look of stone, things of that nature, bring out that beauty. And then of course we always give it a nice hot polished sheen with the finish just to accentuate the material. It doesn't have to be glue lamp. That was only an idea that was talked about. Everything is still preliminary what the interior finishes are. It sure does look nice.
For the existing balcony, that'll be overlooking the new fellowship seating area.
Mhm.
Is that just gonna be redone to be more seating to overlook the fellowship area, or is there any sort of plan for that area?
Great question. We're looking for you to fill the ministry need for that space. Right now, it's just staying as is. But come up with the idea, a youth ministry outreach, whatever it could happen to be. It could be additional seating too, though. It could be its own meeting room space.
Yeah.
Now you've got a job. That's what happens, you raise your hand. Yes, ma'am.
And I don't know if the building committee talked about this, but the existing roof in the sanctuary, you know, it doesn't have the best insulation. Has that ever been addressed in any of these conversations, or? Because that snow can melt pretty easy on a cold day. It'll melt.
Sure.
It's losing heat.
When you have a glue laminated beam system, what you do is you have a structural deck above that has to span between the beams or the purlins. That deck is typically 3.5 inches thick of just solid wood, dimensional wood. Above that, we use, this is a new product. When I say new, that's a relative term, 22 years ago. It's called nail-based insulation form. So it's a different type, it's either EPS or extruded, whatever the insulation material is, built up in multiple sheets with a wafering or a sheathing piece, and it can be vented or non-vented, meaning air can go through a slabbing system. That gets a little more technical, but that insulation system has to be applied from the outside and screwed down to the structural deck before you put on the structure. You could go back on the existing roof and add nail-based insulation. You have to re-roof the exterior to achieve that, but it is achievable when you have a structural deck system. Yeah, everything costs money, but hey, for every engineering challenge, there's an answer. There's just how much you want to spend again. It's almost impossible to do insulation from the interior because what you get is you have your climate barrier. So if you put another layer of insulation on the interior, you already have your exterior. What you're doing is you're trapping moisture between it. It's gonna rot. So you can't do that. Sorry, that's one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know if there's a question for you or for Dean, but this is the timeline with the campaign and breaking ground and maybe finishing. You know, like where are the plans, you have a few different types of plans.
Sure. I'll start this and I'll stop for the capital campaign portion for Gene and I'll pick it back up. Typical timeline. So we're at the, as I said, we're at the end of master at this point. And what we're doing is just having town hall meetings, getting as much people to get eyes on it, to get comments back forward, to build consensus of the direction to go. You're going to be looking to start your capital. You've already looked, we've hired a capital campaign. Okay, so you've already hired them, and first thing they're going to do is a feasibility analysis. Typical feasibility analysis, I would tell you it takes 3 to 4 weeks. So you got a month for a feasibility analysis. After that, you're going to have a conversation with your capital campaign company, and do you want to launch the campaign? What's involved with the campaign? They've already, I'm sure, given you different profiles of a couple campaigns for churches of similar size, templates essentially for you to go through what might be involved. Typical timing for a capital campaign, well, let me start this way. Capital campaigns happen twice a year, and only twice a year. They happen in the spring or they happen in the fall. If you didn't launch it in March, you have to launch it in September. You don't start it any other time. So they're typically 3 to 4 months for a capital. I'm not sure if they told you anything different. Okay. And the reason those 2 dates are picked are, it's cold here. And people are captive. You're coming to church, you're not going to your cabin. I'm from Minnesota, gives it. Everyone lives in Kansas. I live in a cabin, but you have your highest attendance at those standpoints, either in the late winter / spring or Rally Sunday in September, going forward into the fall for the holiday. Those are the key moments to actually have the capital campaign. Like I said, it's typically 3 to 4 months. During this time period, you can move forward on the architectural documents. Most churches don't because it's a financial commitment without knowing where you are on the capital campaign. So I don't recommend it. We do have churches that do move forward. They're on hyperdrive. You just want to make that physical progress forward on that. But you're going to be waiting. So if it's June now, you're probably not launching until September. Then your September, October, November, and the capital campaign. At the end of the capital campaign, this will be the decision. Do funds equate to the entire plan that we've laid out here? Or do we need to subdivide it, create pie pieces, and phase the project? If we need to phase the project, we might spend a month going back and determining what phase 1 is going to be. That's going to take some discernment from the building committee to assure that phase 1 meets the most necessitated need of the church right now. versus what we're pushing off to a future phase, a future project. After that's done, after December apparently, so we're after Christmas time, then we start schematic design. That's the first phase of the architectural documents where we talk about programming of the specific space, how much cabinetry, where do I need a sink for cleanup, things of this nature, where the janitor's room is, what's in the janitor's room. Schematic design in the next phase, design development, which is an additional refinement where we bring in the structural engineer, the mechanical engineer, the electrical engineer. We start building the bones of the building, the internal mechanisms. Those two almost blend together, and together they are approximately 3 months. So that was January, February, and March. Then the next phase is the actual working drawings, physical documents. That's where you finish up structural design, mechanical and electrical engineering. The civil engineering is completed at that point with the architectural documents, wall sections, room finish schedules, elevations, floor plan, door schedule, every kind of schedule you could possibly think of. These are the documents you're going to give to contractors, subcontractors to bid out your project. So that brings us, that's a 3-month process. So you're March, April, May. And then we typically say you are 6 weeks to bid and receive approvals. And approvals are your government approvals. So you have the documents, you send it out for subcontractor, supplier, bids. And at that same time, you're sending it to the city and the state for zoning approvals, building permit, plumbing permit, mechanical, for all these permits that have to be obtained before you can start construction. So you're realistically looking at July of 2025 would be the quickest you would start construction. Right now. That's overwhelming, I know. But I said it really fast. All right, did I overwhelm everyone with that? Not too like suck the wind out of it. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'll just stay up here if you want to come up and ask me an individual question or. I appreciate the time to talk about what your building committee and the executive staff have been working so diligently on over the last, I can't remember, when did we start? Many months. It's been a while. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.